All right. So literally on, it wasn't even day one. It was day negative, 60. What I did when we were talking about with Trendkite was, I tried to understand what that business would look like if it were successful, and then what I absolutely knew, either from my experience or from early work, and what I absolutely didn't know. And so when you ask, well, what order do you think about these things? I'll give you a pretty prescriptive order. Not that this is absolute, but this is the order you should think about things to maximize the chances of success. And the number one thing that you should always think about, is the customer. So if you don't know who your customer is, you really don't have a business. You might have a good piece of IP, you might have a piece of a solution, you might have found like an inefficiency in some distribution channel or some other esoteric part of the world, but you won't build a business. You'll only build a business when somebody's going to pay you money or some other value, attention, however you're going to monetize. So the first thing you want to think about is who the customer is. And so the first thing that I thought about there was I looked at the analogs in the market and in the competitive field a little bit, and for us, we were in the communication space. It's great to talk to at least partially communications audience, because this is the technology that's leveraged by the communication field. So we thought about that and said, okay, the big customer segments that we'll probably be focusing on early on is going to be mid to large enterprises, because I wanted folks that had a lot of money, and then agencies that had a large component of public relations work that they did for customers. And then the next question that I wanted to answer was, who would be the early adopters of what I was trying to get done? So out of the sea of all of these big companies and all of these agencies, who would be the most likely ones that I could reach and that would resonate with what I was trying to do? And so there, the hypothesis was, if I focus mainly on the pure play PR agencies, so they weren't doing like a million things, they were just dealing with communications, they would probably be more receptive to what I had to say. And if they were smaller, I would probably have an easier time getting to someone who could make a decision for me. The second thing, because of my experience in previous enterprises, it was, I felt like high tech was the category that I wanted to tackle. And the reason for that, the hypothesis I had was, well, when you thought about all of the amazing technologies like the iPhone or the AirPod Pro, which I hope is waiting for me when I get home today, that's largely the decision-making process that people have comes from third parties and influencers, really. So you think about communications, you think about PR, it's like, if I read the amazing review of the AirPod, well, I would have bought them anyway, but for some of you, you read the review, it's like, oh, the sound quality is really going to be worth $250 or $300. Like, oh, well, I just read that they're better than the Beats. Well, I got to buy them now. And so I thought if I hit high tech, they had a higher level of marketing that came from third parties, which is really what communications is about. It's about getting influencers to sell on your behalf by saying great things, writing articles about you, etc. So that was the first thing that we did. And then once I knew who I wanted to try to sell to, it was really what problem did they have that I thought I could solve. So here I kind of bulleted out 3 problems that were pretty easy for me to go validate via email and calls and hustling on LinkedIn. And those were really, what I uncovered was the kind of the measurement problem in communications. So if I'm selling my AirPods and I buy a bunch of banner ads, it's easy for me to know whether the banner ads worked because you clicked on the banner ad and then you put the AirPods in your shopping cart and then you bought the AirPods. You read the Boy Genius Report article talking about how great the sound quality is. How do I know how many AirPods were sold from you reading that article? Much harder problem. So that was the problem that we saw in the market. So okay, I know the customer that I'm going to sell to, and I know the problem I'm going to try to solve for them. And then it's only then that it was really the solution that I was going to build to solve that problem. And so this I think is pretty well worn. We knew the metrics that we needed to build. It needed to be like the banner ad. It's if you think about that Boy Genius Report article, it has a banner ad at the top and an article about the AirPods on the bottom. If you clicked on the banner ad on the top, I know that you bought. If you read the article on the bottom, I didn't. That was a solution to that was the solution. So we figured out how we were going to do that. So that gave me the third thing I focused on, which was solution. Then I went to business model, which here is called channels, which is really, well, okay, how am I going to go reach those customers to tell them I have a solution for that problem? Here, we really felt like it was going to be, phone calls. We were going to do outbound telesales. And the reason behind that hypothesis was, as we started doing our research on the TAM, we started trying to figure out, well, how many of these high-tech companies were there that we could sell to? And we figured out it was a pretty knowable number. It was in the tens or hundreds of thousands. I could build a list of every one of those companies. And then I bet I could go on LinkedIn or I could buy a third-party list. I could find out the VP of PR at every one of those companies. And if I had a list of the companies and I had a list of the people, well, why don't I just get on the phone and just go down the list? So we had the hypothesis that telesales was going to be how we were going to reach them. And then we started thinking about the rest of that business model, how much can we charge them? Is it going to be reoccurring subscription? Was our assumption they were going to pay us maybe 10 grand a year? They would stick around for 4, maybe 5 years. We were going to have to go get a ton of data to power the solution because we needed the billions and billions of pieces of news that were getting written about everything, not just the AirPods. That was going to be expensive. And then the last thing we focused on, because it was the hardest to know, 2 things. One was the key metrics. How would we know whether that business model was working? So we'd have a scoreboard. And then what was going to be the unique value proposition that we could cut through the noise with that early adopter segment so that they would not hang up the phone when we called them. So that was the order that we went through. And one of the interesting things that you can see is you can see some of these things highlighted in yellow with a little hashtag risk. These were the things that I didn't know that we really knew. And so for each one of those, the way that we bought down that risk and then increased the value of the company so that we could raise $5 million or $6 million when we only had a couple hundred customers was basically taking each one of those and then running a set of experiments that would tell us definitively whether or not we could get people to come to us, so an inbound model, not just an outbound model, or whether or not the metrics that we thought would convince people that reading the article actually made someone buy the AirPods, whether those metrics actually were the right metrics. And so we methodically went through each of those highlighted yellow areas, ran experiments, and ended up raising $1 million. Then we raised $6 million. Then we raised $30 million. And then, we ended up, selling the company for, 9 times revenue. And the reason we were able to get 9 times revenue, because there was no more yellow on this board by the time that you got to, $30 million in revenue. So Cision looked at it and said, we can pay a lot for this because we know that we have all of those questions answered. We know it's a big market. We know that there's a medium-term addressable SAM, and we know that they have a model for capitalizing on the short-term opportunity that's in front of them. And so that's kind of how we got to that conclusion. So sorry for that diversion.
I love it.
But based on the presentation, I thought it would be a great thing to take the class through.
No, this is I'm thoroughly enjoying. I'm geeking out over here. So for those of you that are not familiar, this is called the Lean Canvas. It was developed by a guy named Ash Myra. Something like that.
Yeah, he adopted it for B2B SaaS.
Yeah.
It was Ostertag that built the original Lean Canvas for like grocery stores or something.
Okay. Yeah. And so Ash is actually here in Austin.
He is. He's a good guy. Very good guy.
And you guys can go online and create your own Lean Canvas, and it's a great way. Again, pulling in the elements of that we talked about, those 6 tenets. It absolutely
they're embedded in there somewhere.
Yeah, they're all interchangeable, right? There might be different like nomenclature, but overall it's all in here. And so this is really cool, Eric. I think for the students getting to see what it was like before. I mean, you sold the company for 225 million, 250 million, and then now you're selling the bigger company for how much?
2.75 billion.
2.75 billion, a billion.